Crescen's monitor model. In the late 1970s, we have Stephen Crescen's monitor model, which is a set of 4 hypotheses. This was inspired by the morpheme studies done earlier by Robert Brown. Now, Robert Brown investigated the emergence of or the learning of 14 morphemes in the first language of the learners. Now, what is a morpheme? A morpheme is the smallest unit in a word. For instance, if you add ed to make a word, turn it into a past tense, that is a morpheme. Or if you add imm to some word to turn it into an opposite, this is also a morpheme. So your suffixes, prefixes are all morpheme. So he realized that there was a consistent order in which the learners of the first language learned the morphemes. Other studies in different languages also confirmed at least the emergence order of 11 of these morphemes. This inspired the interest of the second language learners. They wanted to see that whether the learners who were learning the second language, especially the children, did they also have an order of emergence of the morphemes or not. So Julian Burt conducted this study, and this was followed by several other studies which confirmed that at least in 13 of the morphemes, the same pattern was present. Then the question came up that if there was this consistency in which the order of the learning of morphemes in the children, would the adults also learn the language in the same way? And will there be the same order followed in the adults learning a second language? The studies came up with a lot of similarity between the learning of the children and the emergence of those 13 morphemes. However, this learning was not identical. However, it was realized that no matter what the background of the adults might be, the emergence of the morphemes or the learning of the morphemes pattern was the same. There was a lot of critique on the methodology that was used. However, it was well documented that there was a system in the learning of the second language, and this system was also studied in terms of syntactic structure or the grammar. So what were the basic assumptions from all these morpheme studies? It was realized that the second language learning was both similar and yet different in other aspects from the learning of the first language. Number 2, it was realized that second language learning followed an order. It was a system, and this was guided by certain rules that the learners made up. Now, the differences that were in between certain learners were because of the application of certain principles. However, one must emphasize that there were more similarities than differences. And then it comes to the Stephen Crescen's theory of monitor model. This evolved in 1970 and it was expanded in 1980s in a series of books by Stephen Crescen. I'm sure some of these books must also be available in your library, so please look them up. They are an interesting study. Crescen's theory had these following hypotheses. Number 1, he presented the acquisition learning hypothesis. Number 2, he presented the monitor hypothesis. Number 3, the natural order hypothesis. The number 4, the input hypothesis. And number 5, the affective filter hypothesis. And we will look at these hypotheses, each one at a time, later on.